Men over 50, top 5 grains and seeds that keep testosterone levels strong. Gentlemen, let me ask you a tough question. When was the last time you woke up feeling like the man you were at 25? Strong, driven, sharp, ready to take on the world and the bedroom. If you're over 50, chances are it's been a while. And here's the shocking truth. By the time most men hit 60, their testosterone has already dropped by as much as 40%. That decline doesn't just steal muscle and energy. It robs men of confidence, motivation, and the edge that makes them feel alive. Now here's the twist. What if I told you that the secret to fighting back isn't hidden in a prescription bottle, but right in your kitchen? Small, everyday foods, grains, and seeds you probably walk past at the grocery store have the power to fuel testosterone, balance hormones, and restore vitality. Skeptical? You should be, because for years the narrative has been. Once it's gone, it's gone. You need shots, you need medication. But science tells a very different story. Research shows that the right foods, rich in zinc, magnesium, healthy fats, and plant compounds, can give your body the raw materials it needs to keep testosterone strong, even after 50. And today, I'm revealing the 5 most powerful grains and seeds every man should know about. One of them is so effective. A single handful a day has transformed my patient's energy, mood, and performance in just a few months. But before we jump in, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, share this with a man who needs it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Because this channel is about one thing, giving men the tools to stay strong, sharp, and vibrant, long past the age when society says it's normal to slow down. So buckle up. Some of these foods will surprise you, and by the end, you may never look at your pantry the same way again. All right, let's dive into the list. Why testosterone declines after 50? Testosterone is the foundation of male health. It fuels strength, energy, mental sharpness, and the confidence that makes you feel like yourself. But beginning around age 30, testosterone quietly declines by about 1% each year. You may not notice it in your 40s, but by the time you reach 60, you could be living with 30 to 40% less testosterone than you once had. The American Journal of Medicine reports that nearly 40% of men over 60 already have clinically low testosterone, and that number rises to over 50% by age 70. What does that mean in real life? You gain belly fat more easily. Muscle shrinks even if you stay active. Energy runs low, sleep becomes restless, desire fades, and the motivation that once drove you starts to slip away. Have you ever looked in the mirror and thought, I'm doing the same things I used to, but I don't feel like the same man anymore? That thought is not just in your head. It's the gradual loss of testosterone. The good news is your body hasn't forgotten how to make it. The machinery is still there. Your brain, glands, and testes are capable of producing hormones, but they need the right fuel and conditions to function. Think of it like a factory. In your 20s, production lines ran fast with plenty of workers and raw materials. Decades later, the factory slows, not because it's broken, but because it isn't being supplied the way it should. Stress, poor sleep, and processed food all add friction. Studies show that even 1 week of sleeping less than 5 hours a night can slash testosterone by 15%. Diets high in sugar and trans fats lower levels by as much as 20%, while regular exercise and nutrient-rich foods help men maintain strong testosterone well into their 70s. So let me ask you, are you really just getting old, or is your body waiting for you to give it the right building blocks to get back on track? That's where food comes in. Grains and seeds may seem simple, but they carry the very nutrients your body uses to keep testosterone strong. Zinc to spark production, magnesium to calm stress, healthy fats to support hormone balance, and plant compounds that protect the cells responsible for hormone health. Unlike synthetic hormones, these foods work with your body, not against it. Over my years as a physician, I've seen men in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s regain energy and vitality simply by giving their bodies what they need. And that brings us to the real question. Out of all the foods available, which grains and seeds matter most? Let's break down the top 5 that can help men over 50 keep testosterone levels strong. Grain and seed number 5, pumpkin seeds, the zinc powerhouse. If testosterone had a favorite mineral, it would be zinc. This single nutrient is one of the most important raw materials your body uses to create testosterone. Without it, production simply slows down. Research from Wayne State University showed that men deprived of zinc for just 5 months saw their testosterone levels cut nearly in half. A shocking decline in such a short time. And it isn't just young men who are affected. Studies in older adults confirm that zinc deficiency is strongly linked to fatigue, loss of muscle, lower libido, and even weaker immune function. That's why pumpkin seeds, sometimes called pepitas, are such a valuable food for men over 50. Just 1 ounce provides about 20% of your daily zinc needs, And that's before you count the magnesium and antioxidants that come along with it. Magnesium itself is a quiet hero. It not only supports testosterone production, but also helps regulate sleep and muscle recovery. If you've ever felt tired even after a full night's rest, or noticed that your workouts don't give you the same results they once did, a lack of magnesium and zinc could be part of the reason. I remember a patient of mine, Robert, 67 years old, who came to me feeling drained. He was retired, still walked every morning, but admitted he had no spark left. His energy was low, his sex drive was nearly gone, and he felt like a shadow of the man he used to be. His blood work showed what I suspected: low normal testosterone and a clear zinc deficiency. Instead of putting him straight on medication, we adjusted his diet. Robert started adding pumpkin seeds to his oatmeal, tossing them into his salads, and even keeping a small bag of them in the car as a snack. 3 months later, his testosterone levels had climbed, but more importantly, Robert leaned across my desk and said, "Doc, I feel like myself again." And Robert's story isn't unique. In 2009, a study published in the Nutrition Research Journal found that men who increased their zinc intake improved not only testosterone, but also sperm quality and immune strength. Another large-scale review in the Journal of Trace Elements in Medicine and Biology confirmed that zinc supplementation can reverse low testosterone in men with even mild deficiencies. That means the benefits go far beyond hormones. They touch nearly every system of your health. So let me ask you, if something as simple as a handful of pumpkin seeds can protect testosterone, energy, and vitality, why wouldn't you make it a daily habit? Too many men spend money on expensive supplements or unproven remedies when the solution might be sitting in the grocery aisle, small and humble but incredibly powerful. Here's my advice as a physician. Treat pumpkin seeds not as a snack but as a tool. Keep a jar of roasted pepitas in your kitchen. Sprinkle them over roasted vegetables, blend them into a morning smoothie, or even use pumpkin seed oil in your salad dressing. Aim for 1 to 2 ounces a day. That's a small handful. The consistency matters more than the quantity. When you supply your body with steady, reliable zinc and magnesium, you're helping it restore the natural rhythm of testosterone production that age alone doesn't have to take away. Your body still remembers how to make testosterone. Sometimes it just needs the right reminder. And pumpkin seeds are one of the simplest, most effective ways to give it that reminder. Grain and seed number 4. Quinoa, the complete protein. Protein is essential for muscle health, and muscle health is directly tied to testosterone, but not all proteins are created equal. Many plant proteins are incomplete, meaning they lack one or more of the amino acids your body needs. Quinoa stands out because it's a complete protein containing all 9 essential amino acids that your body cannot make on its own. That matters because amino acids are not only the building blocks of muscle, they are also the raw materials your body uses to make hormones, including testosterone. Without enough of them, hormone production suffers, recovery slows, and muscle mass declines faster with age. Quinoa also brings other benefits. It is rich in magnesium, which supports muscle contraction, sleep quality, and testosterone balance. It contains iron, which ensures your blood carries oxygen efficiently, and fiber, which helps control weight and stabilize blood sugar. Why is that important? Because excess belly fat is more than just a cosmetic issue, it's a biochemical one. Fat tissue produces an enzyme called aromatase, which actively converts testosterone into estrogen. That means the more belly fat you carry, the less testosterone you keep. By helping men maintain muscle and shed excess fat, quinoa indirectly protects testosterone levels. I've seen this firsthand in my practice. Mark, a 61-year-old patient, replaced his usual white rice dinners with quinoa just 3 nights a week. He wasn't looking for miracles, just a healthier option. 6 months later, he was 14 pounds lighter, noticeably stronger, and his testosterone levels had risen by nearly 15%. He smiled and said, "Doc, I didn't think a simple grain could make this much difference." That's the quiet power of food choices. And Mark isn't alone. In 2019, researchers at the University of Illinois published findings that diets higher in plant proteins, particularly complete ones like quinoa, supported better body composition and healthier hormone profiles in aging men. Another study in the Journal of Nutrition confirmed that diets rich in whole grains such as quinoa help reduce waist circumference and improve insulin sensitivity, 2 factors directly tied to stronger testosterone production. So let me ask you this. If a simple swap on your dinner plate could help you lose fat, build muscle, and support testosterone, why wouldn't you make that change? Many men assume they need drastic interventions or expensive supplements, when sometimes it's as easy as rethinking what goes next to their chicken or fish. My advice is straightforward. Treat quinoa as more than just a side dish. Rotate it into your meals the way you would rice or pasta. Use it as a base for breakfast bowls with berries and nuts, toss it into salads for extra protein, or serve it alongside lean meats and vegetables. The goal isn't perfection, it's consistency. Even 2 or 3 servings a week can create meaningful change over time. Your body is always responding to the signals you give it. Feed it foods that protect muscle, reduce fat, and supply the raw materials for hormone production, and it will reward you. Quinoa may look like just another grain on the shelf, but for men over 50, it can be a quiet ally in keeping testosterone strong and energy high. Grain and seed number 3. Flaxseeds, the omega-3 balancer. Flax seeds are often misunderstood. Many men worry about the phytoestrogens they contain, assuming they lower testosterone, but that belief is not supported by evidence. The truth is that flax seeds help balance hormones, protect cardiovascular health, and reduce inflammation, 3 factors that directly support healthy testosterone levels. Chronic inflammation is a silent enemy of male vitality. It damages blood vessels, interferes with hormone signaling, and drains energy. Omega-3 fatty acids, which flax seeds provide in abundance, are among the most effective natural tools we have to fight it. Just 2 tablespoons of ground flax supply more than 3 grams of plant-based omega-3, along with fiber and plant compounds that support digestion and heart health. One of the key compounds in flax seeds is lignans, a type of antioxidant that supports circulation and helps regulate cholesterol. Good circulation is not only important for the heart, it's also essential for sexual health, because testosterone does not work in isolation. It needs a healthy vascular system to deliver its benefits throughout the body. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism found that men with higher omega-3 intake had significantly better testosterone balance and a reduced risk of metabolic syndrome, a cluster of conditions that includes high blood pressure, belly fat, and insulin resistance, all of which lower testosterone over time. Another study from Duke University showed that flaxseed supplementation improved cholesterol profiles and reduced inflammation markers, creating a healthier internal environment for hormone production. I've seen the benefits firsthand. Jim, a 72-year-old patient of mine, had been feeling tired for years. He wasn't sick, but he lacked the energy and drive he once had. I suggested adding just 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed to his morning yogurt. Within a few months, his stamina improved, his blood work showed lower inflammation, and his wife pulled me aside with a smile and said, "Doctor, I think you gave me my husband back." Small, consistent changes often create the biggest impact. So here's my advice. If you're going to use flax seeds, use them ground, not whole, because the body cannot absorb the nutrients from the shell. Sprinkle a tablespoon into oatmeal, blend it into a smoothie, or mix it into yogurt. 2 tablespoons a day is enough to deliver real benefits. Let me ask you, if something this simple could help protect your heart, steady your energy, and keep testosterone working the way it should, why not make it part of your routine? For men over 50, flax seeds are less about adding one more food to the diet and more about giving the body a daily reminder that it still has the power to stay strong, vital, and balanced. Grain and seed number 2. Oats, the stress fighter. If pumpkin seeds are the zinc powerhouse, oats are the stress manager. They are rich in magnesium and contain a special type of soluble fiber called beta-glucan, both of which play a role in reducing cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. That matters because cortisol and testosterone move in opposite directions. When cortisol rises, testosterone falls. Prolonged stress doesn't just make you feel tense. It actively suppresses hormone production, weakens muscle recovery, and fuels belly fat, which in turn lowers testosterone even further. By calming stress and stabilizing blood sugar, oats create an environment where testosterone can stay strong. Unlike sugary breakfast cereals that spike and crash blood sugar, oats release energy slowly, keeping you steady through the morning. This stability helps prevent the roller coaster of insulin and cortisol that leaves men tired, irritable, and craving more sugar. A study published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that beta-glucan fiber from oats significantly improved insulin sensitivity and lowered stress markers, both of which are tied to healthier testosterone levels. Another report from Harvard researchers showed that men who consumed whole grains regularly had lower waist circumferences and reduced risk of metabolic syndrome, conditions that are closely linked to low testosterone. I think back to John, a retired firefighter in his 60s who came to me frustrated with his constant fatigue and growing waistline. His mornings began with boxed cereal, which gave him a quick rush but left him sluggish. We made one simple change. replacing that cereal with a bowl of steel-cut oats topped with chia seeds and blueberries. Within 10 weeks, John had lost weight, felt more energetic, and his testosterone levels had risen. "Doc, I feel steady again," he told me, and that steadiness was exactly what his hormones needed. So let me ask you, if stress and poor diet are dragging down your testosterone, why keep giving your body fuel that works against you? My advice as a physician is to choose oats in their most natural form. Steel-cut or rolled, never instant, because processing strips away much of the nutrition. Cook them slowly, let them release their natural sweetness, and top them with testosterone-friendly add-ons like pumpkin seeds, fresh berries, or even a drizzle of honey. A simple bowl of oats is more than breakfast. It's daily medicine for hormone balance. For men over 50, oats are not just about lowering cholesterol or keeping digestion regular. They are a reliable way to calm the stress response, steady energy, and protect testosterone from one of its greatest enemies, cortisol. Consistency is what counts, and a small bowl each morning is one of the most powerful habits you can build into your day. Grain and seed number 1. Sesame seeds, the hormone synergy seed. Sesame seeds deserve their place at the top of the list for men over 50 because they provide a unique blend of nutrients that work in harmony to support hormone health. They are rich in magnesium, zinc, vitamin B6, and healthy fats, all of which directly fuel testosterone production in the testes. Beyond that, sesame seeds help lower inflammation, improve circulation, and support the vascular system, factors that are just as important for energy and sexual vitality as the hormone itself. Magnesium plays a role in over 300 enzymatic reactions in the body, including those involved in hormone regulation. Zinc acts as a direct catalyst for testosterone synthesis, while vitamin B6 helps regulate neurotransmitters that influence mood, energy, and libido. Together, these nutrients create a synergy that keeps the male endocrine system functioning smoothly. Science strongly supports their benefits. A Japanese study found that men who consumed sesame seed lignans had significantly higher testosterone compared to those who didn't. Another clinical trial published in the Journal of Nutritional Science and Vitaminology showed that sesame oil supplementation improved sperm quality, motility, and overall hormone balance in men struggling with infertility. These findings highlight something important. Sesame seeds aren't just a snack, they act almost like a natural therapy for men who want to protect or restore their hormonal health. I've seen similar results in my practice. Anthony, a 65-year-old patient, had been feeling sluggish and unmotivated. Instead of reaching for supplements, I encouraged him to make small dietary swaps. He began spreading tahini, a paste made from ground sesame seeds, on his morning toast instead of butter. 3 months later, his blood tests revealed higher testosterone levels, but more importantly, Anthony looked me in the eye and said, "Doc, I haven't felt this good in years." His story mirrors what research shows. Sometimes it's not about drastic interventions, but about consistent, nutrient-rich habits. So let me ask you this. If a simple seed can help you strengthen hormone production, protect circulation, and restore vitality, why not make it a daily staple? My recommendation is straightforward. Sprinkle sesame seeds over roasted vegetables, add them to stir-fries, or use tahini in dressings and sauces. Even small amounts each day can have a noticeable effect over time. For men over 50, sesame seeds offer more than nutrition. They provide synergy, giving the body exactly what it needs to keep testosterone strong and energy flowing well into the later decades of life. Why food alone isn't enough? No single food can restore testosterone on its own. Nutrition is important, but it must work together with healthy habits if you want lasting results. Strength training is one of the most powerful tools. Just 2 or 3 sessions a week of lifting weights or doing bodyweight resistance exercises sends a signal to your body to build muscle and boost testosterone. Research in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research shows that men who train regularly maintain higher testosterone than those who stay inactive. Sleep is another pillar. Testosterone production peaks during deep sleep, and men who sleep less than 6 hours a night can see levels drop by as much as 15%, according to the University of Chicago. Stress management matters just as much. Chronic stress keeps cortisol high, and cortisol actively suppresses testosterone. Studies have shown that men under constant stress have significantly lower levels, even if their diet and exercise are good. Simple practices like daily walks, breathing exercises, or mindfulness can help restore balance. And then there's weight control. Belly fat is not just extra weight. It produces aromatase, an enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen. Clinical trials confirm that losing just 10% of body weight can raise testosterone by nearly 1/3. The truth is that testosterone thrives when all these elements work together. Eat the right foods, train your muscles, sleep deeply, keep stress in check, and manage your weight, and you create an environment where testosterone can stay strong. So ask yourself, are you giving your body just one piece of the puzzle, or the full set of tools it needs to perform at its best? So, gentlemen, we've covered a lot today. We looked at why testosterone naturally declines after 50, and we explored 5 powerful grains and seeds: pumpkin seeds, quinoa, flax seeds, oats, and sesame seeds, that can help fuel your hormones, reduce stress, fight inflammation, and keep you feeling strong, sharp, and alive. And we reminded ourselves of one important truth: food alone isn't enough. When you pair these testosterone-friendly foods with strength training, quality sleep, stress management, and healthy weight control, that's when the real transformation happens. I've seen it time and time again in my patients, men in their 60s and 70s who thought their best days were behind them, only to discover that with the right habits and the right fuel, their energy, confidence, and vitality came rushing back. And I'll ask you this, why not you? Why not now? Your body still remembers how to make testosterone. You just have to give it the tools it needs. Now, if this video gave you value, do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any of the strategies we've got coming to help you stay strong and healthy at any age. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you spending this time with me. Take care of your body, fuel it wisely, and I promise it will pay you back. I'll see you in the next video.